So I wanted to make a quick video on these older Miele's because I know I referenced them in the video of my own, the one I purchased. So this is a circa 2007-2008 model in my parents, and these are the Excella series. So these are pretty high-end from the model line at the time. I don't know exactly where they fell in the lineup, but given the fact that they have an LCD in 2007-2008, that's pretty advanced for a dishwasher. I mean, even to have an LCD today is pretty advanced. So one thing I do like is the separate on-off buttons, which I think is a nice touch, very tactile. So they take a second to show up on the screen when they come on. It's a little dim, but that's adjustable in the settings. It's also probably partly due to age. But one of the things I really want to point out here is the difference in interface on this LCD. So this is still a 4-button setup, and you can see it's kind of contextual, so it shows you the assignment to the buttons there along with a clear button. This is the timer button and an info button. And this is, I believe, an error light of some sort, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So if you click the info button on any of the cycles, it gives you basically a pretty good description of what the cycle is for. Pretty nice feature, I think, especially considering that this older model has quite a lot of cycles, if we do a little scroll through right now. And we have cycles that we don't find on anything except the most high-end models right now. So for example, on my mid-range, my 7166, I don't have any economy cycles at all. And there are also some that I know I'm missing. Let's see. I don't have a plate warming cycle. I don't have a glass cold, glass no rinse aid. Large items, normal soiled are also missing. Starch, cheese, plastics, energy saver, water saver, economy. All of those cycles are not on the 7166, which despite having an LCD really only has one more cycle than a standard lower end Miele. The other thing I want to point out is how much more information you're getting on this LCD. So it's a 2-line screen basically, so the maximum information you'll see on each overall is 2 lines of text. And so you have the cycles on this side, and when you go into the settings, that becomes really useful. The settings are a lot easier on this, just due to the greater amount of text on the screen. So, scrolling through those real quick. Lots of options. The very important one I want to point out is time of day. So you actually can set the time, AM, PM, in here. And that's important because this is not something you can do on at least I know 7166, certainly lower. I'm not sure about the 7366, I'd certainly hope so. But what that really enables you to do is when you go ahead and you set a cycle, let's just select normal, and you want to set it on a timer. You don't do it on a timer, you set the time that you want it to start at, and it gives you the current time up there in the corner, plus minus, and it'll tell you when it'll end. So that way you have a good approximation there. So it's going to be a 2-hour cycle, so it says ending at 1 a.m. This is not something I have on a 7166, and I would far prefer to set it to start at a particular time than trying to play the hours and minutes game that I have to play with the more basic timer. I mean, the timer on my current one's really not that much more advanced than the Whirlpool dishwasher I had before, which is a bit of a disappointment. Again, considering you have an LCD, I would expect more functionality, especially when these older ones from nearly 15 years prior had greater functionality. The other thing I want to point out is we have to go to a different cycle to see it, but if we select, for example, pots and pans, we have options here. So we have extended drying and soak on this one. Extended drying is a feature I have in mind, but it's in the settings menu, which means you have to enable it or disable it permanently. You don't get to do it on a per cycle basis, which I find to be rather obtuse, because I probably would want to enable it, say, on a normal cycle where I know I have more plastics, but I don't want to enable it all the time. So it's a little annoying they don't let you do that. And the soak option is one that I don't have at all. So that's a feature that's completely missing from my 7166. I can't enable that for any cycle. The one I do have that is not on this dishwasher, this older model, is extra clean. But I think, if we're being honest, extra clean and soak are not the same things. Soaking is useful for when you have some stuff that's really baked on. It's basically replacing, I'm assuming in theory, when you would put something in the sink and fill it with water overnight. So this is one I really wish I had on the newer one. It's again a shame that if you can want to get it, then if it exists at all, which I don't think it does on any of the newer ones, that you it would be on the higher end models, I'd assume, but a little silly for them to have removed something like that, especially when I know soaking is actually a feature that a lot of modern dishwashers have, for example, from Whirlpool, where they have a long 7-hour cycle where they'll continually keep rinsing the dishes with the same rinse water, I should add. So it's not going to use that much more water than a normal cycle, but it'll do that over 7 hours to try and replicate what you do in the sink. That's a feature I would have liked here. So looking inside the dishwasher itself, it's going to look pretty familiar to anyone who's had a modern Miele from the past 20 years, I'm assuming. You can see they changed the layout of the quadrants a bit in the new one. Folding tines are here versus instead of right here. If you look at this clip, this entire section does come out. You can remove it. These cup racks, I think, are a little nicer than the newer ones. Sure, the new ones have silicone, but I like the greater openness of these, both on this shelf and the upper shelf. I think that probably allows for better spray coverage, but I mean, who knows? I'm not really an engineer here. You have the bottle washer right here. This is a little more basic looking than the newer ones, but still the same function, if we're being honest. Cup shelves. These weirdly shaped pieces here, which I have on mine as well, I prefer this arrangement because on mine there's like this additional section of parts that stick out, and I actually find that to get in the way a little bit of some dishes more often than these do. Not a big deal, but still something to notice. If we look inside the wash cavity, the big changes are that the newer ones, at least on the 7166 and lower, have plastic wash arms, which, I mean, they certainly clean well, but I'm just not certain of the longevity of the plastic wash arms. As I mentioned in my other video, I know Whirlpool's had some trouble with plastic wash arms in some models where they split as they age, especially when you consider the amount of heat that a dishwasher experiences inside. The other thing to point out is that the wash piping is not contained within the cavity, so it's actually run externally. And then if we look at the attachment point for the upper rack, you can see it goes to the side there, so that way it can get fed. So it takes up a little less space, and referencing my previous video, you can see that this assembly here does not come into the rack as much as on the newer models, so you do get a little more space up here. So one of the other things I want to point out is these cup shelves. Now, I think the heights are a little different on this versus the newer one. What I really have noticed is that this one on the right side is more adjustable in height. So you could do it at this high position, or you could do it at this considerably lower position. And it's worth noting when you do that, the entire arm is pivoting. So it's not just, if I can get this to go with one hand. So it's the entire thing. It's maintaining the same pitch, but it's just changing height. On the newer ones, you're only adjusting where the front half can land to make it higher or lower, which I don't really prefer. Instead of folding tines on this center tray here, this entire thing comes out. So if we look at this handle here, you can see it lifts out for a more open area. I think that's a nice touch. It's kind of something I would prefer over the folding tines, especially because I think that the regular tines are spaced fairly well. So it's actually pretty easy to fit in most things, bowls and stuff. Otherwise, the rack is fairly similar. Again, as I mentioned, I think that these racks, while not as luxurious without the silicone on this side, they have more openness for the coverage. I also do like that the tines, the thing that holds the tines of stemware, folds separately. So you can actually do this, for example, for tall glasses here. And then this is more of a literal cup shelf than it is a stemware holder. So that's a feature I do like on this one. I wish they had not removed. So looking at this tray, the silverware tray is very different versus the newer ones. This is the upgraded one from the time. So this section comes out, replicating the functionality of the sliding one on the new one. So if you have really tall stuff, you can remove this out of the way so it doesn't get hit on the second rack. What I do like is that without the fancy plastic ridges that they put on the edges of the new one, you actually do get a little more width out of this tray. You'll also notice that the spacing for these two holders right here is a little different. Now, I don't really think it has a big difference in how it holds things. It's just really down to preferences. You just figure out how the stuff fits a little differently. It's not that big a deal. This center channel is pretty much the same between them in terms of how much it holds. Of course, there's no adjustable height on this one, but if being honest, I haven't really found a case where I needed the adjustable height. The depth of the tray is already good enough to where most things that you'd want to put in a silverware tray fit just fine. And of course, let me pull these out so we can take a look at the top spray arm. which is something I always liked. So in this case, again, stainless steel on that top spray arm. It's still fairly sizable, so probably not much smaller than the newer ones. Of course, the spraying action is probably a little different. You know, and I'm not sure if it's just me, but this, the arrangement of the racks, the bottom rack seems to stay on track a little better than the newer ones. The new ones, sometimes I pull it out and I find that I accidentally get it off the track somehow, which is a little annoying, especially considering the price. So one of the things, you know, not to say the new ones are bad. The new ones have a big upgrade in this over cleaning ability. So the new ones definitely clean better. They, especially baked on foods, I put in some dishes in here and they come out clean, but not as clean as the newer one. But the biggest difference you'll notice is drying. Drying on the new ones is far and away, when comparing normal to normal, no extended drying option selected, the new ones just dry everything so much better, especially plastic. Plastic is the biggest difference, but even some, you know, ceramic dishes I've had come out with just a couple drops of water on there. So they've definitely improved that. I mean, if we're being fair, it could also be age. This has been in constant use for a very, very long time, so maybe the drying performance has degraded. Maybe the fan is spinning at a slower speed because of worn bearings. Not really, you know, it's hard to say for sure, but the new ones do dry very, very well, especially compared to my previous dishwasher that had a normal, traditional American heating element to aid in drying. The last thing to point out is that this one is certainly quieter than the 7166. Now I can't really compare it to a 7366. Maybe they had extra deadening there to bring it a little higher end, but this is a pretty quiet machine doing everything except the drain. The draining is pretty comparable to a modern one. The drying cycle is a little louder, but mostly a different tone, so you notice the drying a little bit more, but the actual wash cycle is fairly quiet. The other thing I want to point out before closing out this video is when you do set a delay, it does not nag you, at least in my experience, to keep pressing OK or start on the screen to continue allowing the delay to happen, basically. So if you set the delay, you close the dishwasher, then as you go throughout the day, you load it, close it, load it, close it, it's not going to keep asking you to hit OK on the screen, which is something that I find just absolutely ridiculous on the new ones. It basically makes the timer a little useless, because what I had envisioned it for is you set the timer to go off in 8 hours, and then maybe as you have some people over, you keep loading the dishwasher, and especially with the power dust, the automatic dispensing, you don't have to remember to set it later that evening. You can just have it run. But you can't do that. It's basically useless. You just have to set it when you basically, maybe you're leaving and you want it to run when you get back. I can't think of a whole lot of circumstances where you want the timer, but you want to keep confirming that you want the timer. It's a little silly. The last thing I'll point out is the detergent tray. They have switched the design. Instead of these doors that open and close like this, they switched to a sliding door, which I far and away prefer, because the sliding door will not get stuck if you put tall dishes here, versus this flipping door. If you put something that stops it from opening all the way, the detergent may not get washed out. This is the sliding door is a design I've had on my Whirlpool from 2016, and I far preferred that. So I'm glad that they made the switch as well, because I think it makes more sense. It's the same on the rinse aid as well on the new ones. Of course, the power DOS on the new ones goes right here. So we'll turn this off. So I hope you got some value out of this quick look. I mean, given the age of these, there aren't really any videos, or at least certainly not many, of this age of dishwashers. But I wanted to show how similar they are to the current ones, and just where things have changed both for the better and for the worse. Thanks for taking a look.